just kind of introduce yourself and say a word or a sentence or something about how you're feeling today. So my name's Becky Chow. I use pronouns she and they, either one. And today I'm feeling really motivated by something I heard, a radio program, or actually OPB TV program I saw about a reporter from the Philippines named, I think, Maria Rosted. I'm not seeing her. Oh, Ressa. And she's been convicted of some crimes and is appealing. And she was talking about how, as a journalist, she hadn't seen herself as being an activist, but that when the battle is for truth, then all journalists are activists. And I've been really inspired talking to the people on the PRAC and starting this new job to think about just the search for truth and how my new position and the Public Records Advisory Council are important in making the search for truth possible in terms of state government. I don't know, I think one way to do it is for me to then ask the next person and each person pass along. So I will ask Scott Winkles to introduce yourself, and you don't have to say much, but if you want to say something.
Good afternoon, everybody. Again, Scott Winkles, and I will be candid. We have it's a hectic and busy time for me, so we've got several projects in the works on my desktop today. So, but I am happy to be here, and I will look forward to conducting this business today.
Do you want to hand it off to someone else, Scott? Can you hear me?
Sure, I'll just go to the next person on my screen. So Stephanie.
Yeah, thank you, Scott. I'm thrilled to be here. Very happy to have Becky on board. I'm glad we have a quorum and just excited to get started. And I will hand it off to Rob.
I'm Rob Bovet from the Association of Oregon Counties. Similar story to Scott, real busy with all kinds of stuff, ramping up for the third legislative session, which will probably hit us at the end of September. Happy to be here. Look forward to our meeting today. And I will pass it off to Mark.
Well, I've just found the unmute button. Hi, everybody. Mark Landauer, Special Districts Association of Oregon. Congratulations, Becky. Welcome aboard. Lots to do. Very busy time, particularly for those of us in local government who are trying to keep our clients afloat and operating and continuing to provide the public the services they so richly deserve. Thank you. Oh, forgive me. I was supposed to pass it along. So I see Emily's mug. So you're up, Emily.
Thanks, Mark. I'm Emily Harris, a journalist with the Center for Investigative Reporting. I'm feeling, thanks for your words of inspiration, Becky. I'm feeling inspired by Scott Winkles' pergola or whatever it is that you're sitting under, because I want to build one of those so I can figure out some way to meet with people when it starts to rain. And I'm going to pass it off to Senator Thatcher, who I believe has joined us. Senator Thatcher, if you can hear us, we're just going around and introducing ourselves since it's Becky's first meeting, and just a word about how you're feeling today. Can you hear us? Okay, I'm going to assume she just can't hear it and pass it off to Michelle Cole with Gallatin.
She's not a council member.
I'm just a member of the public, but I'm here. I work and represent the Newspaper Publishers Association.
Hi, Senator Thatcher. Would you like to introduce yourself and just say how you're feeling today about this? And we're just going around the check-in.
Oh, thank you. Yes, I was looking forward to the first meeting with our new person. So I really think this is important work, and I'm glad to be here and able to participate. I don't know if I can stay the whole time, but thank you for that.
Thank you for coming. I don't know if you can see the other people who haven't talked. It might be Rob, did you already introduce yourself?
I did indeed.
I'm trying to keep track. And so we've got these, Michael, how about you?
Hi. Yeah, hi, Michael Crone from the Attorney General's office. We spoke on the phone earlier. Becky, nice to see your face. I'm not getting my laptop computer to work on GoToMeeting, but I'll keep working on that. I'm really happy to be here. I work in the Attorney General's office and look forward to a productive relationship working with you.
Thank you. So it's hard. So we have caller number 2. I can't remember if it was.
Sharon.
Okay, Sharon.
I joined by phone, so I'll go ahead. Sorry, I can't join by video today. This
That's
is
okay.
Sharon Khosravi. I'm with SEIU Local 503, and I'm about to head into a 2-week vacation starting on Monday, so I'm in good spirits. We are very busy, but we're always extremely busy, and it's always good to take some time off. And congratulations, Becky. Really looking forward to working with you. And
Thank
I think
you.
Les is left to give an update.
Okay, mine will take about a half hour, so just bear with me. I'm with the Malheur Enterprise, a member of the PRAC, and I'm just really delighted that we can quit treading water now and start getting some head of steam for us. Good to be here.
Thank you. How about, so we have members of the public. We do have time for people to make comments at the end, but it might be helpful just if you can introduce yourselves as well. So and maybe we still have some other PRAC members also. So caller number 4.
Hey, Becky, it's Todd. I'm not sure if I'm caller number 4, but I did call in because my Wi-Fi is a bit dubious, like I told you before. So I'm here too.
Okay. And how are you feeling?
Great.
Good.
Looking forward to this.
I think we lost our caller number 5, but caller number 6. Is someone on the line? You have to unmute if you want to introduce yourself.
I don't think callers, if they're on their phone, I don't think they know which caller they are. So let's see.
Oh.
Steve Suo, have you joined us? Do we have Tony Hernandez? No. And do we have Adam Crawford today? Okay. Those were the last 3 PRAC members that I wasn't sure if they were on.
Okay.
So
the rest of the public members, I see Leela, Yelisetti, and all these numbers. If you want to if you want to introduce yourself now, you can. I'll give you a couple minutes, but otherwise we will have public comments at the end of the meeting.
Hi, Becky. Can you hear me?
Yes.
My name is Carly Delabar. I am the Administrative Rules Coordinator and Records Officer for Oregon Housing Community Services. I'm just a member of the public, and I'm here to sit in and listen. So thank you for having me.
Thanks. I didn't exactly get the name of the organization or the group.
Yeah, so Oregon Housing Community Services. We're actually right down the road from the archive.
Oh, good.
Right across from that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else who's listening in?
I'm Cameron Miles. I'm the public records attorney for the Oregon Legislature.
Oh, great. I want to talk to you sometime, Cameron. Thanks for joining. Anyone else?
Yep, this is Representative Karin Power.
Yes, hello.
Hello.
Congratulations,
how are you
Karin.
feeling?
Good. Sorry, I'm a few minutes late. We had a diaper change.
That's so great.
Okay, I'll go back on mute.
Okay, well, thanks. Yeah, well, I'm really honored that you joined us today and with everything going on, and all of the rest of you. I do know that while this meeting is been central in my focus, that the rest of you have a lot of other things going on, and so I do appreciate your time, and hopefully we can be efficient today. So I think if there's no other introductions, the next thing on my agenda that was sent out was to approve the agenda. So we have 9 items. Does anyone have any objections to the agenda that was sent out, or anything they want to add, or can we say that the agenda is fine?
I'd move to adopt the agenda.
I'd second that.
Okay, thanks. Stephanie, are you taking the roll, not me, or everyone? Anyone all in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
Aye.
Okay.
I'm not opposed. I just
Right, you're just saying,
I'm
okay.
late. Yeah, sorry.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, and to clarify, Becky, I never take a specific role unless there are people that are voting nay, and then we do one by one.
Okay.
But, yeah.
I got that. Thanks. So then the next item is to approve the previous meeting minutes. There's 3 different draft meeting minutes, I think, that need to be approved. I was somewhat kind of at some of the meetings, but hopefully people who, go ahead.
Yeah, this is Mark Landauer. I actually did read the draft minutes. Took me about 3 hours, but I would move to adopt the minutes en bloc.
All right.
I second that.
And all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. And thank you, Mark.
And anyone opposed? No. Okay, thanks. So the previous meeting minutes have been approved. Item number 4 on the agenda is appreciation for Todd Albert and Stephanie Clark's service as acting public records advocate and chair of the PRAC. I have to say that starting this job, I've been so thankful for the work that Todd and Stephanie have done and that they have been doing since I've been here. And I certainly appreciate them, and everything I've heard from people talking to them is that I know that that we all probably know how much extra work they were doing when there was no public records advocate. So I want to open the floor if anyone else wants to add some words about that.
Yeah, it's Emily. I also just wanted to echo my my deep thanks, Stephanie. You kept us very well organized and ran a great meeting. We had a lot of, in detailed discussions, and you really helped keep us all focused, and also, figured out ways to help us flesh out different ideas. And I'm so grateful for that. And Todd, I'm so grateful for all of the leadership that you provided in these last many months, taking the initiative to move toward greater independence, even as we work to get the bill to establish that as law in place, and getting your artistic skills in motion, designing logos and things like that. It's been really a great pleasure. And I just want to hope that we'll express my gratitude that we still get to work with both of you, and look forward to this really important year with the legislative session coming up. So thank you very deeply.
I don't know if everyone heard, but Todd and Ginger did win an award for their report in, I guess it was 2018. So that's another thing we kind of wanted to add to this item. In case people don't know about that, it was the National, I should know this, something like the Librarians Association. Todd, do you know what it was?
It was maybe legislative librarians, I think, National Association.
Yes. So I wanted to call that up, but I didn't do a great job of it just now. But I'm planning to tweet out something about that.
It was called the
But hopefully-
Notable Document Award through the National Conference of State Legislatures. So congratulations! And it was the final. It was the final report of Ginger McCall. Was the document.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Yeah.
That's just a good example of how helpful Stephanie's been. I did want to let people know that I got an email from Steve Swo saying that he's on a deadline and won't be able to make it today. Anyone else want to just join in a cheer for Todd and Stephanie? I don't know if you can, I think the agenda is up on the screen, but I'm waving thumbs up and clapping on my video.
I'll chime in. I think both did just a really excellent job in some difficult circumstances, and I do appreciate your efforts and understand that that was it may have been difficult and challenging at times. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Scott.
Thanks, everyone. And I do have to say this council is very good at thanking us along the way, too. So I have definitely felt the love, and I really appreciate it.
Same here. Thank you, everybody, for sticking with us.
So the item number 5, I'm going to kind of turn it over to Emily. She had sent out an email we put as additional materials, but the item has to do with Ginger McCall resignation investigation. And I'm not sure if it's the investigation is exactly about her resignation, but there is an investigation, and Emily can talk a little bit more about it if that's okay.
Yeah, thanks. I don't think this should take up too much time because I think that everybody was on that email that Ginger sent out on July 24th that she had been contacted by an attorney with Stoll Reeves saying that the governor's office was doing an investigation, I'm not sure if, but around the events that led up to her resignation. And I was just a little surprised by an investigation going on, you know, this much after the fact, and was interested in learning what was happening, what more details, and what the purpose of the investigation was. And Becky kindly reached out to ask some information, which she can describe in more detail, I think, if people have questions. But she did learn that it was an effort to figure out what went wrong and seek ways for improvement. But nobody involved is an employee anymore, which also makes me curious what's the purpose of the investigation, or what's the point, really. And there's no timeline, but since it directly involves, you know, this council and the advocate, I was interested in finding out other people's thoughts about this and whether it might be worth it to just send a note from the PRAC to the governor's office, encouraging them to put a deadline on it, and then just, you know, letting them know we'd like to see whatever results of the investigation and maybe clarify the purpose. So that's what I wanted to check in with people about.
So did anyone, does anyone have any thoughts about that?
This is Rob.
This is Mark. Oh, go ahead,
Okay,
Rob, please.
we'll have Rob, then Mark, okay?
I'll just chime in. I would strongly prefer that the PRAC basically stay out of it. It sounds like a personnel investigation, and as a government lawyer, I really don't want people trying to pressure me to put deadlines on my own personnel investigations or what's going on internal. And I don't know that that's really the role of the PRAC. You know, if individual PRAC members, or even if the Secretary of State's office wants to get a copy of whatever final report is generated, if one is generated, I think that's fine. But I would prefer we stay out of it and just let them do what they need to do.
And then I think it was Mark.
Yeah, thank you, Becky. This is Mark Landauer. I would echo Rob's concerns here. I don't believe that the role of the PRAC is to undertake this type of effort. I don't think that that is a part of our charge. despite the fact that the individual who was impacted was the public records advocate. I don't think the charge of the Public Records Advisory Committee encompasses this type of proposal. So I share Rob's concerns and would be very concerned if we undertook something along this lines. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else?
Just a question for the lawyers, if I may. This is Kim Thatcher. Okay, thank you. Why, okay, if there's an investigation, to me, an investigation sounds a little bit serious and possibly sinister. I don't know if that's correct, but just kind of feels that way, especially when there's lawyers involved. Why would, if it's just a matter of ascertaining what went wrong to prevent it from happening again, why would there be a law firm involved, I guess, is my question.
Well, this is Rob. I think there could be a number of reasons that we're not aware of, and I would hate to speculate, but as you know, Senator, sometimes personnel matters spin out into different directions and involve people who weren't previously identified. So while it could very well be, and obviously the primary players involved in that, whatever we want to call it, no longer work for the governor's office, including her general counsel, and and then we obviously lost Ginger. I think there might still be some fallout internal to the governor's office, and I'm just not sure about that. So I could speculate, but who the heck knows? But it did send a signal to me that they still are looking at something serious, even though the key players no longer work for the governor's office. Potentially, I should say.
I mean, my last job was doing employment investigations on stuff. So I kind of agree with what's been said about the fact that just letting any investigation go on without a timeline does make sense to me, because people don't know what they find when they start talking to people, and so it's hard to give a precise timeline. I'm not certain that this is an employment investigation at this point. That's not my impression, but I feel fine of waiting to see what the results of the report are, but I'm also wanting to hear if other members of the PRAC, feel like there's something that should be done right now. Emily, are you feeling like that's enough of a response, or is it something
That's always a great response, right? There's either people who don't have an opinion about it or don't want to speak up or whatever. But yeah, I'm not hearing interest from anybody else in checking in with the governor's office about this. So it certainly couldn't be an action that the PRAC would undertake unless anybody else wants to weigh in with some further thoughts.
I mean, when Emily brought the matter up, I had no problem calling up someone in the governor's office, and I felt they were sharing with me whatever they felt they could, and so if I am expecting that we will be able to see the results of the investigation.
Maybe we just check back like at the end of the year, Becky, and see what's going on with the governor's office again, something like that.
If we haven't heard anything, right? Or if we hear something more from Ginger. I mean, I felt like Ginger's email was not saying this is totally wrong. She was just a little concerned, and we haven't heard back from her saying, keep being worried. But yeah, we won't forget this.
Yeah, no, it seemed like just more of an informational email to me, and it was, I guess I was just kind of surprised that something was still being looked into so long after any events, and obviously was interested because, after that, we have moved as a group to push for a bill that would create greater independence. And if the investigation has to do with like trying to figure out what went wrong, I'm just curious like how that might affect support for the greater independence that we've been trying to get through the legislature. So it does, to me, touch on potentially, again, we don't know the details of what they're looking into, but it potentially does touch directly on PrAC, PrAC interests. So, but if there's not an interest in communicating with the governor's office about it right now by other members of the PrAC, then, I'll just try to monitor it and, bring it back up if it seems like any developments have happened.
Yeah, Emily, this is Mark Landauer. It's not that I'm not interested in the results. I just think this isn't the role of the PrAC. Hopefully that material that you're seeking will eventually be made public. But again, I struggle with the fact that I just don't think that that's a part of the council's role. So thank you.
Sure, and I appreciate that, Mark.
If there's nothing more on that item, I think our next item could potentially take longer than the rest of these earlier ones. It's the 2021 legislative session priorities discussion. Now, this is something I'm just starting to learn about and talking to people. I'm not sure that it's a discussion that I can that I have a lot to offer at this point, but I'll tell you what I know so far is that there are deadlines at the end of September to submit bills to the Legislative Council if it's a bill through the governor's office, is what I understand. Adam's not here, but one thing I did hear is that he had put in a placeholder bill that is there to kind of separate the public records advocate from the executive branch. I don't know what it says. It's not the draft that the PrAC had come up with, but he put it there just to be prepared in case it was an idea that I guess came up in prior discussions for a different funding method for the office. And the other thing I know is that the PrAC earlier this year did approve amendments to the bill that was put out before. And I think we have to talk about whether we're going to go forward with that. And I think we also should talk about whether there are other things that the PrAC wants to work on with this upcoming legislature. The proposal that I put out was to have a subcommittee of people to discuss this or work on this in terms of whatever we come up after today. That doesn't have to happen, but I'd love to hear from the rest of the PrAC members of what you think about the 2021 legislative priorities. What should we do? So.
This is Wes. The council worked really diligently on what's, I think, is Senate Bill 1506 for the special session. And I would like to see the council's work start with advancing that language. I mean, it was, as council members recall, it was a lot of very vigorous, very interesting conversations about that. And I think that we reached a point of consensus, and I think that we ought to, as far as the legislative agenda, that would be step one, is to simply get that language reintroduced.
I would second Les' comments. This is Mark Landauer.
I would jump in and say I think it needs to come from the legislators, preferably on the PrAC, either Karin or myself or both of us or somebody else. But I think not having it go through the governor's office, I don't think is appropriate at this time, since it's kind of a conflict, I think.
I think the bill that Adam had was different and was just an alternative funding thing. Yeah, but I haven't seen it. But okay, go. Sorry to interrupt.
Well, if I may, this is Mark Landauer again. Well, first of all, thank you, Senator Thatcher and Representative Power, for agreeing to introduce our bill last short session. I tend to agree with the senator that we ought to follow the previous process by which we got our bill introduced for the short session. I realize that both Senators Thatcher and Representative Power may have given up a priority bill in order to do that. Thankfully, this upcoming regular session, there aren't those types of limitations placed on the legislators, and as a result, I would concur with the senator that it would probably be at least my preference to ask the senator and representative if they would be willing to reintroduce that measure for the next regular session.
Yeah, this is Emily. I really appreciate that as well. And I think it would be great if it were to go through that path. Just a question on the one Adam put in. We had a discussion about an alternative bill earlier this summer, and I beg your pardon, but maybe there's like some collective memory that can jog me, because the bill was originally, there was a lot of discussion about the correct funding measure. So is this a brand new suggestion, or is this something we actually talked about in June?
And are we talking about Adam Crawford? I apologize. Thank you.
Yes, Adam Crawford at DAS. So I haven't seen the language, but something he told me about. It's my impression that there were different ideas discussed for the funding and sort of operation of the Public Records Advocate, and one of the ideas had to do with becoming, funded by contributions from different agencies or different special districts and the people. A different funding mechanism. Right now, the office is funded through the chief operating officer of DAS. So the people had talked about different funding mechanisms. Adam said that he wanted to not have to be rushed at the last minute in case the group said, let's go with this other idea. And so he just put something in as a placeholder, and he let me know that in case we wanted it, it's there. And I asked, can I see a copy of it? And he said it's being evaluated, I think, by the legislative council or something. So I don't have a copy of it. It was just an alternative. He said, to let him know if we want it killed, we don't want it there. So
didn't we discuss an alternative from Adam earlier this year? Sorry,
I think that's what it was following up on that. That's what I think it was.
Okay.
Scott?
I thought it was I'm sorry, Scott, go ahead, please.
So there were some technical things in what Adam had brought forward from DAS, and one of them was kind of important, and that was the severing the employees of the PRAC from the DAS salary schedule. So my understanding is that there was a fairly significant fiscal impact to just transferring them over based on the principal executive management pay scale. I may be misremembering this, but there were some technical yet important changes in what Adam had brought forward there that would relate to the fiscal impact.
Thanks, Scott. Now it's all coming back to me. You're right. I think that what the challenge is if you backed out the PRAC, it had some type of a budgetary impact on DAS that created a problem, and I think he was assigned to go and try to figure out how to thread that needle. So yeah, Scott, thanks for sort of reconstructing that.
Can I ask if Todd Albert is still on the line? Because I think you were a big part of looking at the details. Is there anything else that you can add to jog our memory? And I'm also just wondering, like, it sounds like the next thing we should do is, figure out a way to look at the options and come up with some final language, or, with the support of, or the help of the elected members.
Hey, it's Todd. I'm still here. So I think
sorry, go ahead.
I'll go. Okay. So if I recall what Adam was talking about, it was a few things. He had mentioned the necessity of removing the office from the section of the ORS that related to HR rules and salary pay schedules, et cetera, so the office could set its own that would differ from DAS's, because the office is so unique and has only two positions, but fairly like higher funded ones. That would be one. The other thing was, yes, Adam discussed that if the office moves out and kind of takes on its own budget, DAS would lose those FTEs and money. That is in part, I think, what our changes are trying to address, and the budget would have to be handed over to us. I'm not sure if a separate bill is needed for that, but from what Becky has relayed, it sounded like what Adam has come up with in their bill, to the minimum extent that we know about it, is not those issues, but rather how the office will be funded going forward. And it sounds like they have picked an assessment system and have that bill kind of primed if needed, or to be introduced either way.
Well, if that bill has something based on an assessment model, first of all, I would say that this committee has not discussed that. Secondly, I would point out that Becky's predecessor had established 3 subcommittees, if I recall correctly, Todd. One of those subcommittees was designed to address this very issue. And as a result, it's my belief that further discussion by the PRAC is necessary before we would want to even move forward with the introduction of a bill, let alone have one sitting waiting for us to decide on. I'm a little nervous about the introduction of any bill that would create an assessment without a thorough, complete discussion amongst the PRAC, and for those of us who would be impacted by an assessment, to discuss the matter with our clients as well.
My recollection was that the assessment was a state agency assessment, and it wasn't applied to local governments. I could be corrected on that, but that was my recollection.
Well, I think the point is, of course, that we need more information before we can make any kind of a decision on that, Becky. And my fear is that because the deadline for pre-session filing is September 25th, and you're recommending a quarterly meeting schedule, we won't have the opportunity or ability to review that, discuss it, and make a decision before that deadline comes and passes. So I guess my question is, what is the next step under these circumstances?
Yeah, I am concerned because it's really important, in my opinion, that we get this bill through, if we can, if there's support for it, this legislative session.
Well, so my thinking was having a subcommittee in order to have further discussion. It's possible we can keep working out things today, but that then if there was a determination by the subcommittee, we would call another interim meeting of the PRAC to approve any actions. And my quarterly meetings was kind of, here's a regular meeting schedule that we can know about, where I, as the public records advocate, would be giving, updates. But yes, I think that, well, unless today, the majority of people wanted to vote to go with a particular version of some bill that already exists, I think more meetings are necessary to get to a final decision. I'll just say, for me, listening in and looking now since I've been on the job, the bill that was adopted by the PRAC at the last meeting, I am concerned with the questions about funding that I didn't see completely resolved, but that doesn't mean they can't be resolved. I felt like it was not clear to me what the impact of the bill passing would be on the office.
So just to clarify, so maybe I spaced out when you said this, but what we had was a policy bill that was going to bring independence. Are we talking about folding into the same bill a funding mechanism if we can come to an agreement, or are we talking about two separate bills, or what?
What I have learned just like since yesterday is this distinction between policy bills and budget bills. I think that what I understand, people should correct me, is that there was an issue that the policy bill that was agreed to move forward didn't address funding, and some confusion over that. So
yeah, I'm quite honestly having similar confusion, Senator, because as you may recall, we have talked previously amongst this group about how do we create a new type of, if you will, revenue stream to support the Public Records Advocate's office that would be separate, distinct, and independent of the general fund, sort of based on a similar model to funding the Oregon Government Ethics Commission, versus what we were discussing within the actual bill that you and Representative Power introduced that seemed to create some challenges, in particular for DAS, when that actual separation between the Public Records Advocate's office takes place with DAS and the subsequent loss of revenue and FTE to DAS. If it's the latter that Adam is trying to address in the bill, I'm personally comfortable with proceeding with the bill. Alternatively, if Adam is proposing a whole new funding stream for the Public Records Advocate, I don't think we've had that discussion, and so I too share a little bit of confusion that you're having. So that's sort of where I am at the moment.
May I?
Yeah.
This is Scott. I think the bill, had it passed in the short session, the funding mechanism would have carried through to the end of the biennium, so July 1st of next year. We would be, so there wouldn't, I think there was some discussion and conflict within the chamber, within the Senate chamber and LFO, as to whether or not the bill had a fiscal in the February short session. I think the issue is now funding moving forward would take an active LFO, would have to be through the general fund, it would have to be an agency some form of assessment. There'd be some LFO action. So if we're going to have a subcommittee, I'm hesitant to say anything more because when you do that, you get volunteered for the subcommittee. But there needs to be, I think it would behoove the PRAC to have a plan B as to a governance structure change if the financial state of the state and the local governments and the people who would be expected to pay an assessment or pay for the service is such that it's not going to go, the funding portion is not going to go through. So if we want to change the governance structure within the PRAC, having that in the back pocket and ahead of time, I think makes some sense if the bill runs into a fiscal problem in LFO. If I've made any sense.
Becky, can I say something? It's Todd.
Sure, yes.
Well, actually, I'd like to ask a question of Scott or whomever else can answer this, because I think Becky made an astute observation in going over the bill that I think is relevant to this discussion that I don't know the answer to, or at least I haven't been able to suss it out from what I've heard so far, and that could be my lack of experience with this. If the bill in its current form passes, and pursuant to Section 9, there is a distinct fund established in the general fund for the public records advocate, what else has to happen in that session for there to then be the money is literally taken from DAS and given to the office, as well as when and how is the appropriate amount of money determined so that it's given to the office? Should that amount be in this bill, or how else can it occur that the office, what are the steps from A to Z, how the office will get its funding should this bill in its current form pass?
I can respond to that as best I can, understanding that LFO bats last in this conversation. The bill would go through the rules or the general government committees, and then it's going to have a fiscal impact with the referral to Ways and Means Committee. The Ways and Means Committee will be the one to decide how much money goes into that account once it's established. Because you have an account established in the bill doesn't mean that the Ways and Means process is going to put either money in it at all or money that you would regard as sufficient for the continued operation of the agency at the service level that we'd like. So that's how that process would work. It would be the amount that goes in would be dependent on the budget process within the committee. And we may not know how that budget is resolved until very late in the session.
This is Les. Seems to me we can move on one track faster, one track slightly slower pace. Can't we go ahead and advance the concepts of what was Senate Bill 1506, which is really the independence issues that we all resolved, and then we can work internally within the process on the funding? It seems like the simplest solution for the short term is simply to capture all the general fund money that has been allocated for PRAC expenses and just move those into the new general fund. That's largely an accounting function more than a budgetary function. I frankly have a hard time believing the legislature would see a legislation approved that creates independence for this and then steps on the air hose to starve a new independent agency of the funding to do what the people wanted it to do. So is there a reason we can't move forward with the policy bill and leave the placeholder in place, and that gives us additional time beyond the end of September to come in with any proposal or work the process to take care of the funding issues? That'd be my suggestion.
Is that a motion, Les?
I so move.
Second.
So I have a question on that. This is Becky. Is the end of September deadline the same for bills that the legislators introduce, or is that just a DAS deadline?
I believe that is the DAS. That's the DAS deadline. Legislators. I mean, the drafting deadline is usually within the first. I'm sorry, Cameron's on the call. Maybe he can.
That is the deadline for Secretary of State, Governor's Office, and all the external ones. The legislature has until, well, they actually can go all the way into session proposing bills. I think it's the end of February when legislators can still propose bills.
Pre-session filings December 18th.
Yeah, that's true.
Perfect.
It's Emily. I just generally endorse Les's move forward, but in your motion, can you just be specific about like which is which? Because I think what you were saying was move forward to
Yeah, I can restate it a
Thanks.
little more eloquently. So
specifically the eloquence, you can set aside, whatever, but specifically.
Yeah. Well, so I would move that the PrAC advance into the 2021 session, revise the concepts outlined in Senate Bill 1506, modification number 2, and that we separately work with Legislative Council or Legislative Fiscal and DAS to address and resolve the funding issues.
Second.
So do people have additional discussion about that?
The only clarification I guess I still have is because of the different deadlines for introducing bills, if a legislator is introducing this bill, then are there any timelines we should set for ourselves? It doesn't have to be part of this motion, but is there, we would just want to.
Yeah, that's a fair question, Emily, and it would be my hope that we could get this resolved so that Senators Thatcher and Representative Power, if they're feeling as though they have a big enough heart to do so, that they would do so in time for it to be pre-session filed, and so that it would be available and printed the first day of session.
Well, I'd be happy to take that as a friendly amendment, Mark, that the council requests that Senator Thatcher and Representative Power sponsor the legislation.
I just want to make sure, though, Les, that both Senators Thatcher and Representative Power are comfortable with that request, because if they aren't, we're dead in the water.
Well, I've been rattling my head. Yes, you didn't see it. This is Kenny Dodger.
Yeah, then I think that that's a friendly amendment as well.
Yes, and I'm happy to co-chief sponsor with Senator Thatcher too.
This is Becky. In a couple things that I've been trying to do about this bill, is to find out what the amount, sort of the budget amount of the contributions from the Secretary of State would be. So in terms of the fiscal impact, I know that was something that was raised before, so I'm trying to get some information. Stephanie said she'd help me with that. Because that's part of the bill, is to take out the contributions from the Secretary of State's office. So I thought it would be helpful to know what that amount is. And then also to connect more with DAS about what the current budget is, what the numbers are for the office. So those are a couple things I am going to try to do. So did we want to just have?
Yeah,
go
I
ahead.
guess my response to that, though, Becky, is that if you could scroll down to the bottom of the bill, please. I mean, the very bottom.
Okay, doing it. Sorry.
I'm sorry, I'm just looking for an effective date.
I think it was an emergency.
Yeah, emergency.
Yeah, it is. Okay, so that does, because it becomes effective upon passage, we do have to understand those issues, Becky. I was going to say that if it had just a regular old effective date, that would be an issue that we'd have to take up for the next biennial budget. But because this becomes effective upon passage, we do have to address that. And as a result, I think that our motion that's currently sitting on the table allows for the accommodation of that discussion. So I don't think that discussion is impaired in any way, shape, or form by the motion that's on the table.
Well, I have a question about that, Mark. So what I'm wondering is the motion on the table to go forward with this language and only this language, or is there a possibility of some amendments to this language and asking that to go forward as a pre-session filing?
I believe that that's what the motion on the table is, because if I understood it correctly, we move this legislation forward with the understanding that additional discussion needs to take place about how this all squares budgetarily with LFO, DAS, the Secretary of State's office. So I believe that the motion would permit additional modifications with Adam Crawford having done some research on this and perhaps having some solutions to the problems he had pointed out. I think that it would be in our interest to have those discussions and be flexible enough to incorporate those into the draft, with understanding that the policy issues are largely resolved. The budgetary issue that is raised in this bill has not been fully resolved yet.
Okay.
But we'd aim to have some kind of resolution of that we could support, and hopefully Representative and Senator would support by the pre-session filing date. So we'd be aiming to figure that out, or figure out our recommendation on that. Yeah. Okay.
Yes, in advance of the deadline to submit for pre-session filing, so you can get printed. In the event that we are unable to get an agreement on the budget stuff, I would still recommend that we continue to push forward with the bill being introduced, pre-session filed, and printed on the first day. That doesn't or prevent us from continuing to have those discussions and hopefully get them resolved.
Well, I have clarity, and I'll third the motion.
Well, so this is Becky. The one additional policy change, and I don't know if people are up for amendments, but why I was thinking of a subcommittee. So one thing I can see adding to this, the second draft of the SB 1506, is the authority of the public records advocate to issue reports. I think that came up previously, that it wasn't clear. It's clear that the PRAC issues a biennial report, but I think that would be useful. I know that Ginger did issue a report. There were some questions if that was part of the authority, and I know when I'm looking to join the U.S. Ombudsman Association, there are two tiers of member voting or non-voting. One of the criteria is if your position has the ability to issue reports, like independent reports. So if that's something people are interested in, that was my only question about this bill, or addition to the funding issue, was just what could be added was the report writing.
So Becky, I've pulled it up on the screen. Is this the number 3, the counsel or public records advocate may prepare reports and studies more frequently? Oh. Is that?
Oh yeah, so it says,
okay.
Right, that is, I didn't really see that the public records advocate can too. Okay, yeah. So if it's there already, that's great. I thought there was some question. It's in, that's in the section of the PRAC, not the advocate, but I think that's clear too.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So my motion is still on the table. And I believe we have a second.
And a third. Right. So do we, I mean, so just a thing, everyone in agreement with the motion?
I think we need to do a vote.
Go. Okay, one by one. So.
Or by voice vote. I don't think there's been anybody who has voiced any opposition or concern. I'm fine either way.
I think after a second, there's discussion on the motion.
Right. So is there any more discussion?
I will vote yes on the motion. If we're going to look at changes, it still bothers me, this section in the statute, in the bill, that asks the legislature to grant affirmative authority for the PRAC to issue or to seek legislation. That's just not something we should ask. We need to get a permission to do. I don't think it's a fatal flaw. It just, anybody can ask for a bill. That's a fundamental right of redress. That you put it in this affirmative language, that we put it in this affirmatively, that we have permission to do something that's a fundamental right, is not something I'm completely comfortable with. I don't think that's something to break the pick on. But I will say that is, on a principle level, that is bothersome to me. So if we were going to look at additional amendments, I would rather see that replaced with a requirement that we report to the legislature on changes to the public record statute at a date certain, and not seek permission to grant what is a guaranteed right.
This is
Scott,
Michael.
this is Mark. Scott, I understand what you're saying, and I don't necessarily disagree with you. I would point out, though, that through this whole difficulty that we've gone through for the last year and a half plus, we were able to ask Senator Thatcher and Representative Power to introduce these bills. But you'll obviously also recall back prior to the 19 session, those bills were put through the governor and DAS process. And I don't think that the language that you're referring to is necessarily should be construed as being objectionable. I agree with you for the most part that anybody can ask a legislator to introduce a bill, but because of the unique circumstances of this council, and it at least at one time was sort of seen as almost a state agency because we had to go through the governor's vetting process. I'm comfortable with that language being there, just so it's abundantly clear to a future governor as well as DAS that this particular council does not have to follow the normal steps that many of the other councils in the state, in fact, do have to abide by. So I'm actually kind of comfortable with it, but I understand what your sort of indigestion is about.
Michael, did you have something?
I don't have anything to add to what Mark just said.
Okay. Well, so it's hard with the kind of muting and everything to know. So I would ask, is anyone opposed to the motion or have more questions about it, more discussion?
Hi everyone, this is Tony. I just wanted to note, I apologize for being late, but I'm here at the meeting.
Hi, Tony. Hi, Tony. So, I mean, I guess I will just say we have the motion on the table. We have a second. And all in favor of the motion?
Aye.
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 And anyone opposed?
Aye.
And is anyone abstaining? All right, so I think the motion has passed. Thanks everyone. The other item under this agenda item for the legislative session's priority discussion. I guess, do people have other priorities, other issues they want to raise in addition to this bill in the 2021 session?
Yeah, this is Emily. My understanding that the PRAC prior to my joining had been working on bills looking at, proposal for a bill looking at fees, and that there was originally some hopes that that could be part of the 2021 session. So I wasn't here for most of that kind of conversation but I wanted to just check in on that. It would be great to move forward on something, something significant like that as well. I know that's been a long-term priority to look at.
Well, yeah, Emily, tough question, particularly during these tough times. As I had mentioned earlier in the meeting, we had 3 subcommittees established at one point to address, among other things, fees. Regrettably, I don't think that those subcommittees have taken off, particularly in light of the fact of this global pandemic. I think everything really, all the brakes were basically put on at that point. I want to maintain my commitment to being open to having that discussion. I just don't know if we can have that discussion in the compressed amount of time to be able to come together with a package that I hope we could all be in support of, rather than tearing each other's limbs off, which I typically don't like being a part of, because it's usually my limbs that get taken off. So with that said, I do remain committed to having that discussion. I question whether or not we have sufficient time to really do it in a manner that would result in a product we can all get behind. I may be wrong, but I'd certainly be curious about other people's thoughts.
Well, it's Emily again. Just appreciate that, and not just the pandemic, but we certainly got derailed as a council for a long time to try to hire a new advocate. I mean, that took up 6 months of our work, which could have been focused on something else. And I think that was the original hope for that year with the shorter session. I hear you about limbs. And it's fees opens up an enormous can of worms, and it's a crucial backbone to any effective public records laws. My concern is that things get delayed and delayed and delayed. I appreciate that this next session is coming up very quickly, but yeah, it would be great to have some clarity on action, some kind of action plan. And I think the larger question, I mentioned fees specifically, but I would love to hear from any other people on the council as to whether are there other priorities, anything that would like to try to get done this session, or just back the independence bill.
My understanding was that the Sunshine Committee had some discussions around transparency by design. I don't think I have a copy of the legislation, but I think that might be something that we should review and take a position on. Steve, I think Steve was into that conversation.
Hey, Michael, are you still on the line? Can you give us an update on that by any chance?
I'm still on the line. I think it's very unlikely that the Sunshine Committee is going to have a specific proposal in front of the legislature for next year. We've submitted a number of recommendations with respect to just like consolidating exemptions, but honestly, nothing that I would characterize as game-changing or particularly sexy.
Thanks for that.
Well, so this is Becky. My suggestion about subcommittees was is still out there, and I think there is, in addition to PrAC putting forward its own bills, I think it could be that PrAC would want to support other bills, and I don't know what the best mechanism to do that is, but my proposal was subcommittees. But if people don't like that, but are interested in kind of seeing what emerges, we can have more frequent full council meetings as well. But I don't know if people agree that that's something that the PrAC could do absent additional bills ready right now, is to review other bills that have to do with public records and, support them if that's what the group decides.
It's Tony. I think it's Emily. Thanks for bringing up the fee component and everyone's contributions. I think next year being kind of a longer session, if there is an opportunity after a thorough discussion on what the fees mean, to propose something next year. I think, and of course, I don't know the deadlines for something that has to do with a legislative proposal that has to impact the state budgets. But if it's within the realm of possibilities, I would certainly support it.
I guess I feel like something like this could and should take some time because it affects lots and lots of people. So it does seem pretty tough to get like a whole new bill written before December 18th, especially with another special session. But I'd like to hear from people who work the legislature stuff all the time, like and try to work on issues that touch a lot of different interest groups. What is the right process to do this? What would you imagine would be the best process, and how long would it take to get to get the PrAC onto a place where we could try to tackle this? Let's just use the fees example as the one to talk about, because I know that's been a priority of the PrAC. How would you propose we go about it? Like what role would the advocate office take? Would we need to be like getting doing research, who would write the bill? Like what's this sort of, can you kind of just give us an overview of what you think it would take, basically? Thank you. I mean, I can tell you what it takes to do an investigative story that, we spend a year on and come out with an hour, but I can't do it for the legislature, so please.
Well, I have a question that might clarify this. If we have a placeholder budget bill, that just gets us a place in line, right? I mean, we can always come in with our own amendments to that proposal, correct?
Yes and no. It depends on what the relating clause to the bill is. So if the relating clause is relating to the governance and structure of the PrAC or something along those lines, then we would be limited by what we could amend into that bill.
Well, but if I may interrupt, if there's a second placeholder bill that strictly deals with the budgetary issues, doesn't that resolve the issue? I mean, that gives us the ore cart, so to speak, to work with, so that we're not under some, compressed timeline to resolve a pretty significant issue. In other words, you have the policy bill, and then you have the placeholder, which is also in a way a placeholder, but then there's, as I understood, Adam or somebody was going to put in place a placeholder bill that strictly dealt with the budgetary issues, and couldn't we use that then as a vessel for whatever the council comes up with, depending on who puts that placeholder in place?
So, well, the budget bill it's not a budget bill. It's a bill with a fiscal impact statement with a referral to Ways and Means. So the bill would go through the policy committee first, and then the budget impacts to the legislation would be addressed. The Ways and Means process typically doesn't like to amend bills from a policy perspective, change the underlying policy. They just want to address the fiscal impact. They'll make a policy change if they need to do that to reduce or alter how the money is spent or how much money is required. But that's not the role of the budget writing committee.
So
I think what we should do is, if we want more time, but we would like a bill pre-session filed, is that we can have a bill drafted relating to public records fees or relating to public records, and file that. And that can be amended into a policy committee, and then it gets into a policy committee, and then we can what's called it's a horrible name for it, but because it sounds bad, but gut and stuff that bill with a more robust concept on fees.
Right, and that's
Well,
what I was envisioning.
Well, the alternative is just to do a straight policy bill and then to borrow a bill related to financial administration of the state. And there are plenty of those typically lying around to use, if you will.
So I think we kind of blurred the topic, and that we're talking now again about the independence bill versus whether there are other bills that the PrAC wants to get involved in or do work on.
I think I need some clarification. When we were talking about, earlier in the meeting, we were talking about a funding mechanism, and now I'm hearing fees, but I'm hearing it being blurred into being a funding mechanism. But I was thinking it was more along the lines of what to charge people for public records. Maybe, was I going the wrong direction here? Or it seems like those two topics got blurred, the funding and the, how to charge people.
Yes, I agree. I think you're right, that what Emily was talking about a fees bill, it was about fees that entities in general can charge for public records.
I think Scott and Mark were just saying that depending on what other bills we introduce, we may be able to use a bill we have proposed to work that concept in once we have a concept. So I think the conversations were joining, but I don't think people were confused about what Emily's suggesting.
Yeah, that's what I heard too, Michael, that it was just a question about like whether, the fee concept of like the relationship between the requester and how much is charged could be plugged into some other bill. And I think Les's original question was, could it be plugged into this bill about, how to pay for the office? But they're Senator, you're correct. They're really two different concepts.
Yeah, and again, I would just say that there are typically a number of bills that are introduced that are so broad in nature that you could fit everything with the exception of the refrigerator into them. So I don't think that we're going to necessarily have a lack of options. We could certainly have intentionally introduced something with a broad relating clause, but that always makes me a little nervous because I've learned after 22 years of doing this, be careful what you wish for. because you may get something you didn't anticipate, shall we say. So I'm a little reluctant to just throw some red meat out there and see what happens.
I am curious, like what, the different roles that this committee brings together with requesters and records keepers. I mean, how do you guys envision getting to somewhere that might address questions that everybody who deals with public records has, or things they'd like to solve around fees? I mean, is it going to take us like a year of research? Is this something that the public records advocate would lead as far as the research? Is it going to take how do you envision that even we as a group get to the place? What do we need to know? How long is it going to take us before you imagine we'd be at a place where we could agree on what we'd like to support?
We were negotiating the legislation that it created the track and the advocate. It was pre-session filed, but we were still negotiating the particulars at the end of session past the committee closing deadline. Deadlines do tend to expedite negotiations. That can be helpful, but I think what would be, from my perspective, and I think there are a number of people on the call who may differ, but if somebody had a fee bill that others could redline and use that as a negotiator and a starting point, that's how I would prefer to do that. So if somebody had a concept that they wanted to bring forward, and then so we have a sort of a document to start working off of, and each side red lines and comes back. That's kind of how other commissions that review legislation do that. So if someone's got a bill, then I'm always happy to. I always want to look at, but I always like to see it. I think the other issue we need to address as a group is there will be a lot of public records bills that we have no idea that are in people's heads right now that are going to get submitted, because we're certainly not the only entity that can seek legislations on these topics. So having I think some periodic check-ins even during the session or after they're filed for review in a position, I think would help us. And I think that's kind of what the legislature was envisioning we do when this commission was created.
And so following up on that, Scott, what type of meeting schedule would you suggest then to enable the group to do that, to be ready to look at things as they come up?
So, MLAC, the workers' comp group that I also monitor and don't sit on, but attend, I think they meet at least bi-weekly during the session to review legislation. It can be a challenge for the people who work in the building to attend, but Friday mornings are usually best in terms of availability.
Scott, wouldn't you agree, however, that there are a heck of a lot more work comp related bills introduced during a session than there is regarding public records?
I've never done an analysis, but I think people are scared of workers' comp, so not really, for good reason. And they don't meet every time. They just have the pencil on the schedule. They pencil it in on schedules, and they don't meet every time. They meet when they have business to discuss.
Well, and I'm trying to recall the process by which Ginger used during the 19 session, and please folks correct me if I'm wrong, but I think she and Michael actually kept a running tally of all the public records bills that had been introduced. I do not recall, however, whether we had actual formal PrAC discussions regarding those bills. And I'm sorry, I must be getting a little bit older, forgive me. But my memory is that we were simply made aware of those bills. We never really had significant policy discussions about those. Is my memory incorrect on that?
I don't think it is. I think, however, I think that was going back to the 17th session. I think the intent is that there would be some review of bills on public records by this group prior to them getting to the legislature. I think that was one of the things that was expected of the of this group.
Well, that's interesting to know, Scott. So I'm happy to call biweekly meetings. I just wasn't sure if there's the interest or ability for people, and that's why I suggested subcommittees. But I think, well, so I'm just interested in whether people in general would like to have more frequent meetings during this session in order to do this kind of review of bills.
This is Tony. I don't mind meeting.
So Tony and then Todd, I think, wanted to talk.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I was just saying, I don't mind meeting for any subcommittee, any special subcommittee. Just let you happy to help.
It's Todd. I wasn't speaking. It must have been somebody else.
I wouldn't think.
This is Michael. I can just tell you that bi-weekly meetings for me in the near future are like between unlikely and impossible. It's just not going to happen. Which is not to say you shouldn't meet, but I won't be available that often.
Yeah, bi-weekly or bi-monthly?
I think the question is sort of what to be doing in September right now. But that seems to be a time that we could be meeting a lot or not.
Well, if we were trying to get some other bills that we wanted specifically to introduce, like, for example, if we wanted to have, a draft bill, like Scott was saying, to red line for fees specifically, some people would have to put something together for everybody else to look at. If we were talking about like during the actual session, starting in January, and trying to stay across any public records bills and figure out if we want to weigh in one way or another on them, that seems like it's maybe a different question. That's my, so, and it seems like the former, well, maybe a subcommittee would be the way to get something started, or maybe it's an individual action. The latter, I don't know how often you have to meet. Seems like stuff happens, like nothing happens in the legislature and then boom, everything happens, but that's a total outsider perspective. But I do think, it'd be worthwhile for us to stay informed on what kind of public records bills are going through the legislature, and weigh in if there's stuff that, we think we want to, as a group, oppose or support, with obviously individual members free to do whatever they want from the perspective of their organizations. I don't know if that's meeting twice a week or if that's, I'm not quite sure what it is, but I think it would be a good thing to do. But that we're talking about starting in January. I'm not.
Well, I can say for one, and I won't try to speak for Scott or Rob, but I can tell you that bi-weekly meetings on public records law, similarly to Mr. Crone, that's going to be big time overkill in my opinion. I think that if we were going to be meeting, it would be maybe bi-monthly rather than weekly at most, particularly in light of the fact that there may be as many as, say, 15, 20 public records bills at most. I don't think we've had more than that in the past 5 long sessions. So I don't think we're going to have a whole lot to undertake if it is the will of the group to sort of review those bills that are introduced and decide whether or not we as a council want to take a position. So I can go either way, but I can assure you that bi-weekly meetings, that dog is not going to hunt.
Bi-weekly and bi-monthly is one of those words that can use either as twice a week or every other week. So let's maybe be more clear on that. I also cannot meet twice a week on this.
I will just say that you will never hear me ask for twice a week meetings. I meant it every other week. If I was mistaken, I apologize. I think that was the example that MLAC uses and the workers' comp group uses, and they just pencil it in on calendars, and frankly, most of them get canceled. But I think just having, and maybe the solution is that if a proponent of a public records bill petitions or asks the PRAC for review, then maybe we schedule a meeting and do it that way. So the legislature's getting the feedback that I think they were looking for from this group, but we're not pounding people's calendars.
It's an interesting approach because it's very reactionary, and I guess you'd have to sort of like talk to people to see if they wanted to, the PRAC to weigh in on it. But it's interesting to consider.
I think we have two. I'm sorry. There's these awkward silences, so I'm jumping in here. So I think we're talking about two different things here too. I think we're talking, one, do we need to put together a work group to figure out if we're going to do anything else? That's sort of to Emily's question, I guess. And then to Becky's question of, how often do we meet to review legislation? I think are two different things. I think the latter is a lot easier to address at this point, and perhaps a standing meeting once every 2 weeks during the legislative session, and it can be called off for any number of reasons. But if we're going to have it, let's be sure to use our time wisely and review a bill and make a decision whether the PRAC is going to take a position. Whereas on the first issue, whether we put together a work group to address potentially other legislative matters that the PRAC may want to pursue, I remain open to participating in something like that. But I don't think we should be going into that process with an expectation that we'll necessarily have a product for introduction for the next legislative session, if that makes sense. I mean, I'd love to get to a solution to some of these problems. Don't get me wrong, Emily, and I'm trying to avoid this notion that we're just kicking the can down the road because of the pandemic. In a way, yeah, we are kicking the can down the road because of the pandemic and us having to hire a new public record advocate and so forth. But as I've said, and I'll remain to my word, I'm open to having that discussion. It's just that we've had a few little speed bumps put in our path.
Mark, I do think you clarified the two issues, and what I will ask is on the scheduling. At this point, I'm the chair of the council, and I'm wondering if you would all just leave it to me to schedule meetings in the future according to what seems to be necessary. Or if you want to try to have a set schedule meetings coming out of today's meeting. But I'm happy to just take that responsibility of figuring out what's going on and what type of meeting schedule would be good going forward for the time being.
This is Les. I'm content to let you call, so to speak. I mean, you're going to be the one matters on a day-to-day basis, and we'll have a sense. If it becomes necessary to put a schedule together of more frequent meetings, that's fine. But I refer to your traffic management skills to call on us when we're needed.
I'll second Les's motion there.
Yeah.
Okay, well, so anyone opposed to that, of not having a set schedule right now, but leaving that up to me for the time being? Okay, no. And then on the first question of whether there should be a work group of the council, I don't think I have any say in that. I'm happy to sort of facilitate it, to work on it, but I think that would have to come from the members of the council to decide you want to set something like that up.
So this is Rob. If I could maybe just make a quick comment. I agree with what Becky just said, but the composition of any task force or work group or subcommittee of this committee would really vary depending upon what issue we want to tackle. If we just go with Emily's example of coming up with a new framework for establishing fees for public records requests, we're going to need Mark and Scott and myself and Adam from the state, and we're going to need a whole bunch of people from the requester community, including media and representatives of the public. And that would be who we would need as stakeholders. And kind of like has been implied by a number of you, many of us that I've just listed off are scrambling day to day just to deal with our COVID issues. My priority is getting money from my members to do the public health response that we all need done. So setting aside some of our, quite frankly, life and death critical priorities right now to do that work group seems unfathomable to me, to try to get something squeezed into 2021. But like Mark, I am absolutely committed to doing all those work groups and getting all this stuff resolved. But trying to shoehorn it in, I'd suggest we probably not try to do that.
And I would personally echo Rob's sentiments. I didn't want to come out as bluntly and as articulately as he did, but I would say that those of us who are representing local governments right now are completely and overwhelmingly swamped with responding to this current health crisis. So, I didn't want to just come out and say it, but the fact is we are all struggling at the local level to address the emergent issues that are happening virtually every day.
This is Tony. I just wanted to, Rob, Mark, and everyone else, thanks for the upfront. Honestly, I kind of wonder after hearing the time crunch, if there's a way to just start designating just maybe some, for lack of a better word, research time. I find myself with with a lot of time these days, which I'm happy to, maybe kind of like just take a stab at, like maybe surveys for each of the two sides, for maybe public agencies and then for the requester side, of like what kinds of issues they'd like to see with fees, and then maybe pass that around to the group just to consider as time maybe frees up later on next year or for the next session. But I do wonder, outside of the folks that are in the thick of it during the session, there's maybe going to be others of us that won't be that busy, that could be spend some of that time to help alleviate some of the research ahead of time. So all that said, I would just like to offer that as an option.
Tony, this is Michael. I think that's a very generous offer and a really great thing for other people to be thinking about. I would encourage also, like, not just sort of finding out what people around here think should be done, but also to the extent we can look into what other state laws provide on these questions. And I think there is a lot of information out there that would be very useful in advancing this conversation. So.
Yeah, I agree, and that is really generous, Tony, because it would be great to have just even some baseline starting points. When people's minds are freed up. So, whatever you could do in that direction, I'd be happy to help you. I don't know how much time I could dedicate to it this fall, but not because I'm working in the legislature, but I think anything we can bring to the table to have shared information when we actually can focus on a potential bill would be, certainly helpful groundwork.
Cool, that's great. Happy to get something going if it's okay with Becky.
Well, yeah, I'd love to work with you on that, and I've been reading up on the public meetings laws and the serial communications, but I do believe I can communicate with people one-on-one for information purposes. So I don't know that we need to have a full subcommittee or work group, but I'd be happy to work with you on looking into that.
Mm-hmm.
So similarly, if other people want to talk about other kind of research projects or particular bills that are pending, I'm happy to do that at any time. And then when it seems to be something that should be brought to the big group to schedule that. I don't know if there's anything else that people want to talk about this agenda item, the legislative session priorities.
I only just want to point out one thing, having, just in terms of the intersection of public records and the crisis that we're in the middle of right now, this pandemic. And I know you're all aware of this, but just to remind us that they're not completely separate issues. It's been harder for requesters to get information about how governments are handling the coronavirus, and that's vital public information. And anyway, I just wanted to just kind of remind people that these aren't separate. Like, public records very much intersect with challenges, and I don't mean that as a way to try to say that that's more important than actually, health agencies surviving and, people who are out of work getting support and the real crises that local governments are facing with funding. I'm not intending to undermine that very important work and all the work that, especially the three of you who work for local government agencies are doing, but I just want us to remember that public records are an integral part of the public's, business in all these different aspects, and that the coronavirus is one great example of that. But that's it.
Yeah, I have been thinking about how to, promote public records and public records requests as a kind of critical government service when there is an emergency. I think one of the things the office can do is to continue trying to collect information about, how the pandemic did impact people's responses, and just kind of in the future looking back at ways to be, to keep the core functions of public records releases going. So if no one has anything else on that, we'll have more on the 2021 legislative session, obviously going forward with the bill, and there's follow-up on that. But if there's not any more discussion on that agenda item right now, we can move to the next one. This is something I put on the agenda, the biennial report of the office. And I don't know if that's correct, the report of the Office of the Public Records Advocate. I think it's the report of the Public Records Advisory Council, not the Public Records Advocate. But it's my understanding that it would kind of be my job to draft it and put something on paper for people to work on. And Todd pointed out to me that it's due December 1st to the governor. So that's something that I want to work on. I don't know if people have an interest in joining a subcommittee or work group on that, or if it sounds like people are pretty busy, and that just my going forward and trying to work on it. And then when I have something that's ready to be reviewed, to call a meeting for people to do that, and that I can, touch base with individuals to help me answer questions as needed. But for sure, if someone wants to join in and volunteer and working on that with me right now, I'd love that.
Is Todd still on the line?
Yep, I'm here.
Hey,
I'm here.
Todd, Mark Landauer, a question for you. Is that annual report from the Public Records Advocate, or is it from the council? Because my memory was that Ginger issued that report. It did not come from the council. As a matter of fact, we didn't see the report until it was issued, if my memory is correct. Am I wrong in that?
I don't recall who saw what before it was published, but no, it is the council's report that's due to the governor at the conclusion of even-numbered years, or the last month of even-numbered years, and the council voted for Ginger to append a report that was her observations on the current state of the law, but the report, the actual body of the report, the substance, is the council's.
Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, so that's that's a mistake on the agenda, but my understanding did follow Todd's, that it's a PRAC report, but that I would help to lay it out and help to create it, but it wouldn't be from. I'm assuming it would just be kind of summary of activities in the past 2 years.
If the council submits it to the legislature, does that mean we have to write it, or we could ask the advocate to write it and we approve it? I don't know what the procedures on that.
Yeah, I think Emily, that's what happened last time, is that Ginger wrote a report, which was from the group of us. We reviewed it. We had some suggestions, which she incorporated. And as Todd was saying, my recollection is we also authorized her to include her own observations in like a sort of separate section of the report. And I would suggest we should do the same, pretty much follow the same process here. Although I understand, Becky, it might be a little harder for you to write a report on 2 years you haven't been a part of, really.
I think there's a lot of documentation and information I can go back and look at, and I'm comfortable throwing something together for input. But like I said, if anyone in particular is really excited about the report and wants to let me know and to work with me closely, I'm happy to have that assistance from anyone.
Certainly appreciate you taking the lead.
Well, unlike the rest of you, this is my full-time job, so I can do it. So I guess on that, again, my what I proposed is my deadline of being the end of November. I think I had thought that it was due the end of December, but now seeing it's December 1st, I'm definitely going to get working on that and get drafts to the council before the end of November. But again, I'll update a schedule on that and hope that I can get some good input on it before it goes out. Anything else on that report? Okay, and so for new business, we did have Emily reminded me of something about the open data report. So I think Stephanie maybe had something about this, or Emily, one of you two.
Oh, I actually asked Stephanie if she could present a little bit about it. I just remember that there was a project on open data, a new proposal, like a new overarching approach for the state of Oregon that's sort of in process. There is a comment deadline, I think next Monday or Tuesday, and I just wanted to ask if it might be worth, if we have the time. I know it's we're not through with our meeting, that's been long already, but I mean the allocated time, but if we could get a brief overview of what that is and how it fits into our work, that I'd really appreciate that. And if it's better at a later time, that's okay too.
Yeah, so this is Stephanie. Hi, everyone. So I am not the Chief Data Officer for the state, but I do know Catherine Darnell Helms, the Chief Data Officer. She's fantastic. She's a public records nerd like all of us, so she's one of the good ones. I had actually suggested when she was hired that she come and present to this group and talk to us about her work with data and data research, but right now she has issued her first draft strategy report, and basically I won't break down the 5 pages for you right now, but I will send you the draft report and where you can comment if you are interested in doing that. Just to explain briefly what it is, basically her idea is that the state as a whole should have a strategy with how it collects data, with how it shares data, with how it disseminates information, and that strategy should be in alignment with one another and not this free-for-all that we find ourselves in, with each agency kind of doing their own thing, throwing together a big data project and not really talking to each other. We really want to coordinate and be more intentional with the way that we're collecting data and the way that we're sharing that data with folks such as Emily. So I will send that information along to you. I won't try to summarize it in depth, but I would suggest that we have Catherine come and talk to the group. And I think she can solicit specific feedback from each of you. I think she's a great partner for us to have. And I'll email that draft strategy out to you all.
Can you tell me what, as the Chief Data Officer, where is Catherine located in the state?
DAS, I think.
Okay.
Right. Someone can correct me. I don't have Adam on the phone.
Okay.
I know she does report to the governor.
Isn't she under Terrence?
Is she?
Yes.
Okay.
She's a direct report to him, and he and Katie are on the same level, direct reports to the governor.
Okay. Thank you, Todd.
Sorry, who did you say she reports to?
The state CIO. Terrence
Okay.
Young. Yeah.
Does anyone else? I think that, what I've looked at, that open data plan and the way that Stephanie described the mission, I think it's really important, and I hope that our office can collaborate with the Chief Data Officer in terms of encouraging that kind of, transparency by design in new tech projects around the state. Does anyone else have any comments on that? And does anyone else have any other new business that they'd like to bring up now for the council? Okay, not hearing any. And now, do we still have any members of the public on the line who would like to make comments? Didn't see any particular public comments in the chat. Giving people a little time to work with the technology. So I'm not hearing any. I think we can, possibly be ending this meeting early. What I'll say to follow up is that we don't have our next meeting scheduled, but I will be scheduling meetings according to my judgment. Like I said, I am committed to at least the quarterly meetings that I sent out. We're going to be following up on this bill and try to keep people updated and see how that goes. And I'm, like I said, this is my job now, so hopefully people know that you can contact me at any time about any business that comes up or that you think should be on the agenda for the PrAC or for me. I really appreciate everyone's time and all of the good information I've gotten so far from all of you PrAC members. I feel really welcomed and supported, and it's exciting to see that I have so many people committed to improving the public records laws in the state that to work with. I don't know if there's no other comments. I will adjourn the meeting.
Thank you for the meeting, Becky. Well done, and once again, welcome.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Becky.
Thank you, Becky.
Thank you. Thank you, Becky.
Stay safe, everyone.
Yes, you will.
Bye-bye.
Well, bye.
Bye.
Take care.